Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, Dzkan Toys, where I do reviews and share my thoughts on some of my favorite toy releases. Today we have another new review to look at, and it is the Figma 468 Gilgamesh caster version. As usual, let's check out the box and get the opening started. Alright, here we have our caster Gilgamesh unboxed. So while we take a 360 view of him, let's talk about the background information of the toy company as well as the character. In regarding to the toy company, Figma is by Max Factory. They're distributed by Good Smile Company. Max Factory CEO is known as Max Watanabe and Masaki Aspie. Their aim is to create highly articulated palm-sized figures, which usually have a heavy focus on anime characters. In regarding to our character Gilgamesh, he's a staple and a well-renowned character in the Fate franchise. This version of him is the caster class that is summoned by Risuka Fujimaru in the Fate Grand Order game. Other than the game, he also appears in the anime known as Fate Grand Order Demonic Front Babylon. His identity is Gilgamesh, the supreme wise king who returned from the journey of immortality. In the legends, he has been described as the one who saw everything. At times ruthless, at times approving of human nature, the great king of Uruk who strictly led the masses. Upon returning from his search for immortality, he found Uruk in a decaying state due to his negligence. Since then, he has dedicated himself to repairing and maintaining his kingdom. Now let's move on to the aesthetics and paint job of the figure. In terms of the aesthetics, I have to say Gilgamesh over here looks fairly unique compared to a lot of other Figmas or even a lot of other characters. His outfit is most likely inspired by Babylonian or Sumerian culture. Taking a closer look at the head and the upper body, we can see that he has a fairly unique design over at his head. He has the sculpture of this scarf that's wrapping around his head. Moving down, we also have him wearing this vest, which have extended collars. At the neck part, he also have jewelry sculpted in onto his body. Similarly, jewelry can also be seen at his ears as he is wearing earrings. These details are also nicely sculpted. Moving down to the waist area, we have some interesting sculpt work here as well. One thing I want to mention and point out is on his waist section, where his abs is, I guess, we have these type of unique and stylish sculpt work done in black. There seems to be some kind of a pattern over his waist. So these are actually not painted on, and these are actually sculpted on as they have some sort of a 3D effect to them. So just to point out what I'm talking about over here and here. Also for the waist section, we do have a waist armor or some sort of a belt. It is done in this gold color, which looks great. Another interesting design about Gilgamesh's sculpt work for the arms is that it has an asymmetrical design. As seen on our left side or the right hand of Gilgamesh, he's wearing this metal design gauntlet on one side, while the other does not have the gauntlet. So this is something to note about in terms of the design. Moving down to the lower body of the Gilgamesh caster figure, we have him wearing this very unique and stylish pants. It pretty much shows his thighs and some of his leg. At the bottom, it's very baggy. I think only Gilgamesh is probably stylish enough to pull off a pants like this. If we see somebody wear this pants in real life, we're probably gonna be like, okay there. Some nice sculpting details for the lower body. Again, we have his thigh, as I said, is showing over here through the pants. We do have this blue colored design over here. Again, this part is in a 3D sculpt work instead of a print on. So this is something to note about. It gives the figure some texture over here. Similar blue tattoo-ish design can be seen on the arms and on the lower legs as well. So over here, we can see the blue design on the legs. These are also in this 3D sculpture. Finally, for the feet design, Gilgamesh seems to be wearing some sort of armor shoes, which is pointy in the front. Oh yeah, also here's a back view of the Gilgamesh figure. I forgot to mention to you guys, we also have this very interesting design aspect that we almost missed when just looking at the front. We have these sort of feather-like design over here and here attached to the waist. It seems to be from some sort of animal. I'm not sure if it's eagle or maybe some sort of bird, but they do add some stylish design aspect to Gilgamesh over here and emphasize on his entire outfit to be extremely stylish. In terms of the color theme and the paint job, Gilgamesh have a really crazy color theme. There's a lot of colors here to talk about. Of course, we have all of the blue on his body, which I mentioned to you guys is his tattoo of some sort. And then we also have this black sort of tattoo in the 3D sculpture detail on the waist. We also have another tattoo on the arms, which is done in purple. These are not 3D sculptures, these are printed on. Here's a closer look to what I'm talking about. So these tattoos on the arms are done in this purplish color. Some nice painting details can also be seen on his vest over here, which is actually separated into blue, red, and gold. We have some primary color of blue, but red as decoration and gold as decoration. So this, I can tell Figma did a great job and definitely put some effort in terms of the paintwork. For the pants, it's done primary in this red color, but we do have some added details in terms of the paintwork, which is this swirly design. These are done in sort of a blue-purple color. Extending to his feet, we also have gold and purple in terms of the design. True to pure Figma fashion, they always do a good job on their anime-like faceplates, and Gilgamesh here is no different. So I won't say too much about that. But in terms of the hair and the hair sculpture with the color, we have a separation of his blonde hair, the light blue for the horns, the white for the head decoration scarf. So all of that looks great together and the lines looks very clean. Also on his forehead, we have this drool that's done in this blue color as well. Turning back again, we have this brown color for his fur decoration on the back of his waist. We also have a darker brown color as highlights on the design of the furs. I'm not sure how well this shows on camera, but overall the paint is pretty clean, but I do have some sort of paint defect over here on this scarf on his head. As you guys can see, there are some red lines and black lines on it. These are most likely paintwork scratches from other parts of this figure or some sort of scratch from the factory. So these most likely I can clean them off with some alcohol wipe, so it's not a big deal. Overall then, the design and the paint job of this Gilgamesh figure is extremely well done. It's definitely one of the better Figma releases for the Fate series in terms of the aesthetics and paint job. Next, let's move on to the accessories of this figure. So in terms of the faceplates, we have two extra faceplates to swap on and off. The first one that we see over here is his normal face, which comes straight out of the box. The second one, we have one with his mouth slightly open and his eyes looking toward the side. It looks like he's looking down on someone, which makes sense because Gilgamesh is always really full of himself, and in the caster version, he is a king after all. The final one is with his mouth fully open. This one is a screaming face or a battle cry face. So most likely you can use this one for battle poses or for him unleashing his noble phantasm, Gates of Babylon. Moving on to the hand accessories, we do have some good swappable hands in this release in typical Figma fashion. First, we have the two closed fists that we see. Next, we have two open palms. Of course, something to note about all of these hands are they're asymmetrical, so even though both of them are open palms, the right side, of course, is in his gauntlet, while the left side is his bare hand. Next, we have two closed fist style gripping hands. So these both can grip his weapon, which I will show you guys just in a bit. The last set of hands included are these slightly open palms. The thing about these two hands is both of them have a peg on the palm of the hand, and this is for holding his accessory, which is the book type accessory. I will show you guys now. Here we have his signature accessory, which is one of the books that he used when casting spell. So it's probably a spell book, and is actually pretty interesting in terms of the design. It looks like a stone tablet, which makes sense for Babylonian or Sumerian historical culture. We have these design over here. It's mainly done in this brown color with some darker brown as highlights. And yes, we can fully open it. On the inside, it's just plain plastic. So most of the details are on the outside, and we can actually fully close it as well, so he can hold it in his hand. And yes, we do have a peg over here at the center part to peg into his hand. So I'll just show you guys that now. Here's what our caster Gil looks like when he's holding his spellbook. I have to say, it is cooler than I thought. It actually brings a lot of character to the overall display, so I might consider displaying him like this on my shelf. Just on a side note again, we can put the spellbook on either hand, as both of these holding hands has peg to hold the spellbook. Interesting enough, because the spellbook is sort of this magical item, we also have this extra stand included in this release. So what we can do is plug the spellbook on here, just like this. And you can have it look like it is basically floating beside Gilgamesh, something like that. So there's definitely some cool display options over here. Next up, we have Caster Gil's signature weapon, which is this axe. It's done in this gold color, which makes sense because all of the treasuries in his Babylon treasury is all sort of goldish color. But we do have this nice blue highlight over here and on these edges here, these sections. So there's a nice color separation. We also have this pattern design molding here. So very nice. You can get him to hold it in either hand. For easier access to hold, you can also separate the staff and the axe piece. And after you make him hold it, we just slide it in back together. So let's let him hold it and check it out. So this is one way to hold it at the mid section, and it represents him in this resting pose. This is the typical battle position hold, which then he would use in battle. And I forgot to mention to you guys, so for holding it here at the lower staff section, we can actually remove the bottom piece just like this. After you have him hold it, you can plug it back in. So yeah, the axe is actually bigger than I initially thought it would be, so it does looks pretty menacing on him. Posing wise, we don't really have too much of a weight issue for the axe, but for long-term posing, I still recommend a pose that's not as dynamic as the one we see over here, because the joints may become loose and worn out over time due to gravity, of course. Time for the articulation section. So let's check out Gilgamesh's articulation over here. For the head, we have a 360. It is possible, but obviously you have to work around his collars, which may hinder the 360 a little bit. Very unique design feature, we have these headbands over here. So these are actually on a Figma ball joint, which means we can move them up and down or side to side depending on the angle. Same thing with the other one. You can turn it around and style it around to make it look like the wind is blowing or he's in battle or something like that. We do have him look down backwards. Backwards is not as good because we have this collar over here. This mid-piece section over here also have articulation, which means we can sort of move it up and down. I'm not sure what you guys call this, but it's part of this head piece. Moving to the arms, we have all the way up, 360. So arm articulation is fairly good because it's not being hindered by anything. He's just wearing a vest. For the elbows, we have a bend. The wrist, 360 rotation, side to side or up and down depending on the angle. As for the midsection, we do have this movement here. Bending backwards is really nice. Forwards is so-so. We do have a side to side, and it does have a rotation as well. The lower waist, we also have a slight rotation. We don't have any sort of bend, just a rotation for the lower. Moving down, we have this unique piece at the back, which is this animal fur. It does have articulation. Whoops, I popped this joint here, but these are in ball joints, so you can move them around. Similarly, the middle section of this fur piece and this one, even though we can move them, the movement doesn't seem to be too much. So I would say these are barely articulated. The fur at the back is more just for decoration. As for the legs, we have all the way up till here, and then it'll be hindered by this belt design. At the back, it is being hindered by this design over here, which is the fur. So the leg articulation wouldn't be as good as some other Figmas. Towards the side kick, and then we have the knee bend, which is not that good as well because of the design of these baggy pants. And lastly, for the feet, we do have the up and down or side to side, depending on the angle, and a toe pivot. This piece popped off again. Just plug it back in. Yeah, so I have to say, Caster Gil's overall articulation is definitely one of the weaker ones in terms of Figma, but it's understandable. His design is very unique and they have to make sacrifices in terms of the articulation. On the bright note, I mean, Caster Gil as a character, the way that he attacks is that he doesn't really move. Gilgamesh doesn't really move. He just summons a bunch of weapons and attack his opponents. So it makes sense. He's not an acrobatic fighter, rather he's more of a spell user. Now time for some size comparisons. So this one is probably the most interesting one. We have Caster Gil versus Archer Gil, which is our OG Gilgamesh. In terms of height, they seem to be around the same, although it may look like Caster Gil is a bit taller, but the slight height advantage may be due to his head decoration. But then again, Archer Gil here does have some spiky hair, but overall I would say they're around the same size. You guys can be the judge. Next up we have another Figma, which is our Chaldea Master, Rika Fujimaru. He is obviously shorter than Caster Gil over here. I have to say Caster Gil does look like one of the taller Figmas in terms of the general Figma line. Next up we have some other lines that are similar sized. We have a SH Figuarts Goku. Here we have a Mafex Batman Hush. Finally, we also have a Mezco Punisher 112 scale, the Netflix version. Alright, time for the final thoughts on today's figure review, which is Figma 468 caster version of Gilgamesh. In terms of the figure, I would have to say the positive is the aesthetics and paint job. In terms of the paint job, it's probably one of the better Figmas out there in general, although mine did have this minor paint scratch. I can clean it up no problem with some alcohol wipes, so that's not an issue. Also, another positive of this figure is the aesthetics. Caster Gil is one of those Figmas that have a very unique aesthetics. It's extremely stylish and full of vibrant colors. In terms of the negatives, probably the only negative for this figure that really matters is the articulation. He's definitely weaker compared to some other Figma counterparts, but Caster Gil over here is weaker in that department due to his overall sculpt work and design. I mean, he doesn't move around too much in terms of his fighting style anyways, so if you're a fan of Gilgamesh, the caster version or the OG version, I would still recommend him. Originally, he's a figure just like Proto Arthur that I was debating to get or not, but just like Proto Arthur, when they have them in hand, they seem and look much better. So anyways, there goes the end of today's review. If you guys enjoyed the video, please remember to support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. I would really appreciate that. As always, my friends, until the next review, stay safe, be young at heart, we're out.
You can say hello, but I don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like. You can watch me go, cause I don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. You can say hello, but I don't need you to